I will also explain. Okay, so we're going to start today with this warm-up, and welcome to everyone. It is really good to be with you. And so to give you an example of number 2, how we can try and get to 24 with this card, we could go 8 minus 5 is 3. So we've used those 2 up. And now we still have to use 8 and 1. So then I could go 8 minus 1 is 7. And 3 times 7 is 21. Now I didn't get 24, but I got close. So I want to see, can anybody get 24 using those 4 numbers? And you can only use each number once, and you can only use plus, minus, times, and divide. Lesedi got close. 5 times 8, which is 40, and then 40 minus 9, that would give me 31. So not quite there yet. So guys, I'll give you a bit more of an introduction after this. Let's just see if we can do this as a group. There's lots of us here. I'm sure we can figure it out. What other things could we do to get us to 24? So what about if we go 8 plus 8 plus 5 plus 1? Well, that will give us 22. So you're getting closer, getting much closer. What else could we do? I feel like 8 minus 5 would be a good idea. Oh, I'll give you the hint. 8 minus 5 is, Chulu is on the money. Yes. Okay. So what if we go 8 minus 5 is 3. And then we go 8 times 1 is not 1, it is 8. And now we've used all 4 numbers, but we go 3 times 8 is 24. And there we did it. So well done to Chulu and Sihle. Let's see if your way works. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 5. 3 times... I think we've used numbers that we didn't have in that one. 7, so 8 minus 1 is 7. I think we've used up a number twice there. Okay, so that was our warm-up done, and it was really, I hope that every time we do this, Math 24 gets a little bit easier for you. It's a great game for learning about multiplication and practicing. But let's start with kind of the admin and announcement stage. So just a quick little show of hands. If this is your first lesson at Watobe, could you just basically give us a thumbs up in the chat? So in the chat, you'll see there's a thumbs up. If this is your very first lesson, I just want to get a feel for how many of you it's your first time today. Because I'll say a bit more if if there's lots of you, it's your first time. So again, if it's your very first lesson, just put your thumbs up. Not your first time. Okay, fantastic. Look, there probably are some of you who are new, but you'll pick up what we're doing as we go. The unit we're working on is something called integers. So the set of numbers called the integers, and how to do maths on the integers. Before we get to that, I just want to remind you that at the end of the day, we are doing a fun quiz. And that quiz will be based on the content we've covered. This is lesson 4. So it's L4, lesson 4 in a 6-lesson series. So we're 2/3 of the way through today. And so that will happen. The other thing about today is we really want those of you who, this is the end of your 2-week free trial. If it is today is the end of your 2nd week, you will be getting a message, or at least your parents or guardians will get a message from Watobe. And if you've enjoyed your time with Watobe and you found it helpful, please tell your parents or guardians so that they know that basically after the 2 weeks, you do have to pay. It's 75 Rand a week or 300 Rand a month. And so at least they'll know that it's not a spam message, that it is a message around a service that you're using. So please tell them, and also tell your friends. Because we know lots of students could use some extra help. And we think Watobe is a great way, a nice, safe way to learn extra maths and be in a fun space together. But we need you guys to tell your friends. There's no risk because 2 weeks is free. So please do spread that message to your friends. Okay. Anything from you, Anya, about admin, and then I really want to get cooking with the maths now.
No, I just got a message in the chat now. So as Sis mentioned, so Wednesdays are our quiz days. So what happens is we first do our lesson. I'm just explaining this for the new kids, but we do our lesson as per normal, so it carries on. And then towards the end of the lesson, you can access the quiz via your Watobe site. So that's how you got to this lesson. But I'll also post the link of the quiz at the end of this lesson in the chat. So in the last like 15 minutes or so, I'll post it. You need to be logged into your Watobe account though. So that's really the only news from me. So please, I'm not going to release the link yet, only at the end of the lesson. So we're first going to learn a bit and then we'll try. All right, back to you, sir.
Fantastic. Okay, lots of talking, just like a real classroom. But let's get going with today and let's do a little recap. So over the last 4 lessons, we've been talking about a set of numbers called the integers. And the symbol that the integers have is the Z. And often when you think about the integers, you always think about a number line. And so on a number line, the point 0 is really important. And if we had to go in this direction, you would get the positive integers. And if we go in this direction, you get the negative integers. And so a lot of what we've been doing has been centered around finding things on the number line and then moving left or right. But there have been a couple of important other ideas that have come up. And I just want to go over them before we go to the actual questions. The first thing that we did in this section was we spoke about adding and subtracting integers. And then in the previous lesson, we spoke about multiplying integers together. And the reason that can get interesting is that you can add and subtract or multiply both positive and negative numbers. And so there were a couple of important ideas that I just want to go over. The first one is, if you have 2 negatives next to each other, 2 negatives cancel each other out, and you end up with a positive because of that. If you have a negative and a positive next to each other, then, and the example that we gave was that if you get some positive feedback and some negative feedback, you tend to remember the negative feedback. Now, this type of situation will happen quite a lot, where you have 2 operations next to each other, and you need to decide what the effect is, or what the step is to simplify it to one operation. The last one that we can speak about is if you have plus 3, and then it just stays plus 3. And so I want that to just be very, very clear at the beginning, that when you have 2 negatives interacting with integers, they knock each other out and you end up with a positive. Whereas if there's one of each, the negatives will prevail. And then in the positive case, you will get the positive, and the positive give you a positive. Miss Anya, you had a very nice little explanation. Do you remember do you want to give it again?
Yeah, actually, I thought about it again last night. So if you and your friend have something in common, right, so either you both like cheese, I know that's a weird thing to say, or you both like soccer or whatever. If you have something in common, all is good, you'll be mates. So negatives and negatives have got something in common. So it's going to be all good. It's going to be positive, right? If a positive and a positive are friends, it's all good. It's going to be positive. But the moments when you are friends with someone who has different interests than you, so for instance, now Mam's referring to negatives and positives.
Okay.
Things are not going to be so lacquer. You're going to have a bit of arguments in the future. Now, I'm not here. I know we get that saying about opposites attract, but that's something completely different. All right. But I hope that helps. Let me know in the chat if that explanation helps.
I mean, it doesn't really it's just a nice way of, it's important that this basic knowledge is something we're going to use throughout today. And in the previous lesson, what we had was we had situations like -3 times -2, and we had to decide what happens in the scenario. And what we said was we first look and see, well, what happens when a negative times a negative happens? We end up with a positive. And then what do you get when you go 3 times 2? You get 6. Okay, so in that situation, but if we had -3 times +2, we would have ended up with a -6. If we'd had +3 times -2, we would have had -6. And then if we'd had 3 times 2, we would have had 6 or +6. You'll notice that when you leave something out, when there's nothing there, it's automatically positive. So I just want to start the lesson today with clarifying that idea, because I'm going to build on that later in the lesson. I did see a hand go up. I don't know if, but it may be a little bit early for questions. I will explain a bit more. Okay, so when I left you in the last lesson, we left with these questions. And I said, look, guys, we're just going to park the bus on these, and we're going to see what we can do in the next lesson. So I want you now to try and do these 4 questions for me. And once you've done them, I want you to put them in the chat. Now, bear in mind that this is a little bit different because, for example, in the first question, there's a +4, then a -5, and then a +3. And I want you to try and think, what would be the logical way for those things to be multiplied? But I want you all to try your best. Even if you get this wrong now, I'm going to go through it slowly with you, but I want you to attempt to do it by yourself. And so I'm going to give you 3 minutes for that. It's 12 minutes past. At 1:15, I will give you the answers. And while you're working, I'm going to answer questions because there seem to be questions coming. So if you could put your hand up, and Anya, if you could allocate people to ask their audible questions. Can I zoom in? Cool.
Okay, Yandisa, you up first. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for the Zoom. Yandisa, you can unmute and ask your question.
Afternoon, sir.
Hello.
Sir, I was asking that since you showed us the -3 minus -3, it gives us a positive. I was saying if a question comes up, let's say -3 times +2 divided by 5.
Okay. We're going to talk about division in the next exercise today. I just want to finish the multiplication first. We're absolutely going to deal with this. I just want to finish one thing first before I complicate it with another. But it's coming today for sure.
Sorry, right. Next person is Sadie. The Sadie, you can ask your question. Just remember to unmute yourself.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Sadie. Go ahead.
Sir, I already did the work.
Oh, perfect. Do you want to give us an answer?
No, sir, I'll wait for others. Yeah. I'm not sure with mine.
Okay. Well, I'll give you some feedback. I see the answers are coming through already, which is great to see. I'm going to do the first one.
Sir, I'm correct.
Well, let's just confirm first. Okay. First of all, if you have a positive times a negative, you're going to end up with a negative. And if you then go a negative times a positive again, you end up with a negative. So this question is going to have a negative number at the end. And often students find it easier to think about that. Ask yourself, what is 4 times 5? It's 20. What is 20 times 3? It's 60. And so the answer is going to be minus 60. Okay. Then, as we go to number 12, let me get a smaller pen. Number 12, there's a negative times a negative. So this one over here is going to end up positive, and this one is already positive. So the final answer will have to be some sort of positive. And so what I need to then think about is what is 8 times 2 at 16? 16 times 5 is going to be 80. Now, there's something that's happening where we can actually use a bit of a shortcut. And I spoke about this in the last lesson. If the number of negatives is an even number, so in this case, there's 2 negatives, the question is going to end up being positive overall. Whereas the other one, if the number of negatives is uneven, I'm not sure pink is the best color for this, sorry guys, then the answer is going to end up being negative. So that's a bit of a shortcut that some people might find helpful. For example, in 13, if I count this, there's 1, 2, 3 negatives being multiplied, which would mean the final answer is going to end up being negative. And that's a helpful shortcut to bear in mind. Okay, it's now put a past. Let me give you the answers. So in this one, negative times, I mean, you can do it the long way. The one way to do it is to say negative times a positive is a negative, then a negative times a negative is a positive, positive times a negative is a negative. But like, oh my goodness, that takes a long time. So a quicker way to do it is just go, is the number of negatives uneven? And then I know the final answer will be negative. And then I go 3 times 2 is 6, 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 6 is 36. And then the last one, because there's an even number of negatives, I know it's going to end up being positive. It's a little bit like a switch. It's like if I have one negative, it's negative. Now, if I have another negative, that together makes a positive. Then if I get another negative after that, it switches it negative again. If I get another negative, it switches it back to positive. So it's kind of like a switch that you're switching on and off each time. That's why you only need to know whether or not it's an even number, in which case the negatives cancel each other out, or if it's an odd number. Okay, so in 4, it's an even number of negatives, so it's positive, and the answer should be 2 times 2 is 4, 8, 16. Okay, I quite like what I've got going in the chat there, but if you have a question, please pop it in the chat. I'm quite willing to clarify this idea further if needed. I think the important idea is that we're looking for the number of positives and negatives, and the number of negatives helps us understand something. Okay, question. Don't be afraid to use the chat, guys, because I can answer those questions quick in the chat. But if there's hands, Anya, who do we want to go first?
Kiatle Giles, up first, please.
Go ahead.
Hi, ma'am. I wanted to ask how you got number 13. I don't understand it.
Okay, there's a long way and a short way. The long way is to go, what is minus 3 times 2? Well, minus 3 times 2 is going to be minus 6.
Minus 6, I mean.
But now I'm not finished because I still need to multiply by minus 1.
Yes.
Which is then going to make that whole question positive 6.
Positive. Oh, okay.
And then I still have to keep going with it times by another negative 6, which means that the final answer is going to be negative 36, which is what I got at the top. Now, a shorter way of doing it, you can do it the long way, but a shorter way is to say how many negatives are there. And because there's 3, I know the answer is going to end up negative. And then I just multiply the numbers together.
Oh, okay. Now I understand it.
Fantastic. Who's next?
Up next, we got Shakira.
Go ahead.
Sir, I already understood it while you was talking to the other girl.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go on to, I'm going to get some of you get going, and then I'm going to answer more of these questions on the side. So what I want you to do is I want you to just use your common sense. Now, the thing I'll tell you is that the same rules that apply for multiplication apply for division. And I want you guys to try and do questions 1 to 6 for me. And then while you're trying to do questions 1 to 6, which is focused around division of integers, I'm going to answer questions from the chat stream. So everyone else, you're busy. I'm giving you, what's the time now? It's 20 past. I'm giving you until 24 minutes past to do these 6, and then I'm taking questions. So who's next on the list?
Okay, now well, Shakira, you can lay your hand. Now we've got Una.
Una, go ahead.
Hi, sir. I wanted
Hello.
to ask if every time that I see an integer that's in brackets and then an integer that's in brackets right next to it, should I just assume that there's a multiple sign that's there, but it's invisible?
Exactly what you do. So if two numbers are next to each other, like for example, you could even have this situation, that means they're being multiplied. Okay. So the only time, and it automatically at 2 without anything in front of it, it's a +2 being multiplied by a +3. So it is the default assumption is if your neighbors, multiplication is the operation that is carried out. So you're quite correct.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Pleasure. Next question.
It's Ria Betswe.
Rebecca, go ahead.
Hi, sir.
Hello.
Sir, I just wanted to share something with all of you.
Is it mathematically related?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, but like, yeah.
With integers, I realized that if the signs are not the same, we subtract, and if the signs are the same, we subtract.
So that sounds like you're on the right track. If the signs are not the same, it's negative. If the signs are the same, it's going to be positive. That's very insightful. Sounds like you're on the right track. Well done. It's nice when your brain kind of figures out those shortcuts, eh? All right. Who is next on the question and answer session?
It's Mosa, I think.
Go ahead.
Hi, sir.
How's it going?
Sir, on number 13.
Yes.
I don't understand how did you how do you problem negatives?
Okay. Can I suggest, Mosa, we do record this lesson, that you have a little look at that section again on the recording. I'm going to refer to the same question again later in the lesson. So we're going to do an example where it's going to come up again, and I want you to just watch carefully at that stage. Okay.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to now, just for the moment, pause on the live questions and get back to the main thing here. And number 2, I've done number 2. And what I want to point out is that when you have a positive divided by a negative, we end up with a negative. So that, I hope, was kind of what you guys were thinking and if not, we can talk about it. And then you simply go, what's 10 divided by 2? It's going to be 5. And so you should get -5 for number 2. Again, Anya, let me know if students are struggling with this. I can't quite keep my eye on everything. But
I do see. I do see a few hands up, please. Guys and girls, I really ask you guys to post your questions in the chat. I'm also a maths teacher. You can ask me as well. But also, I think if I can jump in here, guys, the rules that we learned at multiplication, like I explained earlier about negative times negatives are positive. Those rules apply also to division.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of questions are actually coming from. So, okay, back to you, sir.
Fantastic. If you look at number 4, we have a negative divided by a positive. And so this is a bit of an abstract idea, but for now, and I'll actually explain to you why, probably maybe today or the next lesson, I'll show you what the distributive principle is and why this rule has to work. But for now, it is a matter of just understanding that we've agreed that a negative divided by a positive ends up being negative. And then we say divided by 3. So I've lied. 12 divided by 3 is not 3. It is 4. Now, you don't have to do it like that. You could say, what's -12 broken into 3 parts? It's -4. But I think a lot of students will benefit from thinking about, for example, number 5, there's a negative here, and there's a positive hiding here. What's a negative over a positive? It's going to be a negative. And then what's 25 divided by 5? It's -5. And then for 6, it's a negative over a negative, so it's a positive, and then it is a 4. Okay, so in a lot of ways, the division is very similar to the multiplication. So while I'm going to set this next task, everybody could do 7 to 12 now. And then while you are doing that, I'm going to look at the chat for questions now. So I'm not taking live audible questions, but I want to see students who are unsure, if you could put that in the chat while the rest of us get on with this. And once we're done, we post our answers in the chat. And then, Anya, if you could just keep giving students shout outs or whatever, if they've in the chat where possible.
Will do.
But I see some good answers coming through in the chat now. I see quite nice. But again, it's important, if you don't understand, it's important that you do voice it in the chat. We do want to know about it. And so please do let us know. That's one of the things with being online, we have to make sure we communicate explicitly. Shakira has asked, can they do one? Shakira, why don't you do which one? Number 7. Why don't you do number 7 for us? Jump on the line and do number 7. Shakira, you can unmute yourself and then.
Okay, sir. So that is minus 37 divided by minus 6 is equal to 6.
Okay, and not just any 6, it's positive 6. You are absolutely correct.
Sir.
Well done. You are on a run. You're on. My pen is too thick. You are on fire. Okay, let's get the rest of those answers coming in the chat. And we can keep an eye on how things are going. But I feel like you guys are getting this. I feel like I need to give you a bit of a challenge now. Don't you? Okay, maybe not quite yet, but I feel like you are mastering this, which is good news, I guess. Let me, while you guys are doing this, turn my pen down a couple of notches. So 8 positive over a negative is a negative, and then 60 over 10 is 6. So again, ask yourself, what's a negative over a negative? It has to be a positive. And then what's the number that goes beyond that? Watch out for the signs, guys. It can be tricky. Like number 10, there is a positive hiding in front of the 45 and a negative at the bottom. So what that means is, what's a positive divided by a negative normally going to end up being? I want you to think about that. Okay.
I'm gasping.
So let me actually finish number 9. So negative over a negative is a positive. 49 over a 7 is 7. That should be there. And then for 10, I'm actually going to end up with a negative here. And then 45 divided by 9, 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. It's going to be 5. Notice, guys, how I know my times tables. And so if ever I get stuck, I can do the mental maths. And this is part of the reason why we do maths 24 at the beginning. And why it's good to learn your times tables. And I think I've mentioned this before. There's a very cool competition that's run by an organization called Olico. And it's really important to practice your times tables. If you ever feel unsure, make sure you practice them. It's a really important skill that you need in mathematics. Okay, I think most answers are coming through, so I'm going to move on. So positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. 48 divided by 6 minus 8. And then the last one, negative over a negative is positive. 30 over 5 is 6. So what I want to hear from you guys is, if you're feeling comfortable and on top of things, a thumbs up. If you're not, I want you a thumbs down. And so I'd like to see that expression of that in the chat. And also it's past. And so I want everybody, after they've thumbed up or thumbs down, I want you to stand up and stretch your legs, because I think we've been doing a lot and I want to do a little brain break. Okay. Someone has got some serious thumbs going on. Okay, I don't know if I've showed you this brain break. I get confused between the grade 8s and the grade 11s. But this is sort of like the ear nose touch brain break. So you need to stand up. Once you've voted, you must vote in the chat, thumbs up or thumbs down. And then we are going to do a little midline crossing dance thing just to let our brains chill out for a bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our right hand and we put it on our nose. And then we're going to take our left hand and we're going to put it on our right ear. So you're going to feel a bit confused. But now take your left hand, which is on your right ear, and put it on your nose and put the other hand to the opposite ear. And then see if you can switch back and switch back. Now it takes concentration. So always think about the hand on the ear is going to the nose, and then the other hand is going to the opposite ear. And if you practice this lots of times, eventually your brain will figure out exactly how to do it, and you can impress your friends at school. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, it does get easier to do. And so just give that a go and give yourself a break for a moment or two before we get going for the second bit. Okay.
Sir, for our next, maybe we're doing some other questions and stuff, sir. Can each of us, can we do our sum and then can we tell it out to everybody? The answers for our sums?
If there is time, we absolutely can. But let's just see how the time, because we have to do a quiz as well today. So if there's time, I'm definitely keen to do that. It's just a matter of if we run out of time. So let's just see how we go. Because I still want to do a little bit more about division. And so these types of questions like we have above, which were being asked about earlier in the lesson. Okay, so these questions are division and multiplication together. And so the question becomes, what do we do when we're trying to solve a question like this? So first of all, notice how much it's a little bit harder because of the additional choices that have to be made. There's actually, like often in maths, there's actually two ways you can do this. I'm going to suggest the one that I think is easiest, but you can do either. So what I would do is in question 4, I have to simplify this. Sorry, this is the command term would be to simplify. And if I did that, I would probably focus on the top first. And so I would say -2 times +8, or negative times a positive, is going to give me -16 over -4. Now this is equivalent to the top, but I'm not finished. Then I would take this and say, what's a negative divided by negative? It's a positive. And then I'd say, well, what's 16 divided by 4? It's 4. And so now I know my final answer here is going to be 4. Now, you didn't have to do it like that, but I think it's the easiest way to do it. Somebody else could also do it. No, I'm really going to recommend that way. I really think that's a good idea to do. But I'm also going to do number 5 with you. In number 5, the problem is that these are kind of separated. Now, you could multiply along the top first and then on the bottom, but I think the easier way to do it in this situation is to rather work just with this part and then work with that part and then multiply those two pieces. I think that is probably the easiest way for most students. So you ask yourself, what is +16 divided by -2? Must be negative. What's 16 divided by 2? It's -8. Okay. Now that has to be multiplied by -9 over -3. So a negative over a negative, we sort of discussed this rule in the past, it's going to be a positive, and we don't even have to write +3, it's automatic. So it's going to be +3. Now we say, what's a negative times a positive? It's going to be a negative. And what's 8 times 3? It's going to be 24. Okay, now the challenge for you, my students, is to do the following. I would like you to try and do these two at a minimum. And then those who are feeling very comfortable, if you could do 8 and 9 here. And then once you've done it, pop it in the chat. Whether you got it wrong or right, doesn't matter. I want to see that attempt. Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 minutes to do that. And so that's going to take us until 17:40. And I probably need to zoom in a bit if I can here to make life a little easier.
So can I just jump in here?
Please do. There's some questions.
Yeah, I know we have, yeah, it's not really a question, but just something I've noted in the chat. I know some learners at their schools might have started a division of fractions, because I know someone in the chat mentioned that we need to switch the fractions. That doesn't apply here. So don't, and some of you might be frowning out, don't choose, because we haven't even looked at that yet. So it's just business as usual.
Wow.
All right. Back to you, sir.
Thanks, Alia. So I think a good way to think about it is in question 6, I would start by dealing with this part over here, and I deal with it by itself. And then I do the next step. You know, in this question, I would deal with, say, that part there, and then I would also deal with this part over here. And once you've dealt with those parts separately, you can then do the division after that. Okay. So let's just see. Again, I'm not worried if you get this wrong here. The whole reason we're together now is to try this, maybe get it wrong, and then get some feedback. Oh, sorry, guys. My camera was pointing the wrong way. So please don't be afraid to make mistakes. We know that just the process of making mistakes, seeing the answer afterwards, helps us retain it much more than if we just don't actually participate. Can you put the actual question, Shakira, number 1? Let's just, what was number 1? There wasn't number 1, there was a number 4. Is that what you're talking about? Okay, so just a reminder, what are you guys doing? You are doing this one here at least. And for those who are feeling very comfortable, you're doing 8 and 9 as well. Okay. Aha. So Scarlett, when I say minus 40 times minus 5 times, we do need to find a common factor. Yes, we do. Huh? Well, let's look at 6. I think that's the one you're talking about. So in number 6, we have minus 40 on top, and on the bottom, a negative times a negative is a positive. So these two are going to kind of knock each other out. And 5 times 8 is 40. And then I have to say to myself, well, what's a negative divided by a positive? It's a negative. What's 40 over 40? It's 1. And so the answer for number 6 is going to be minus 1. Maybe I should.
So,
yes.
If I know you did number 6 nice and slow now with the class, but can I ask that you number 4 also nice and slow? I have tried to explain in the chat, but the kids aren't really explaining, but just take it step by step, show them the symbols, and yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so everyone who needs a little bit of a refresher, number 4. In number 4, I'm choosing to focus on this top part. The fancy mathematical word is denominator for the, not numerator for the top part, and denominator for the bottom part. Okay. I'm first doing whatever's on the top first, and I'm saying what's a negative times a positive? Well, a negative times a positive is going to give me a negative. So I know I'm going to end up with a negative on top. What is that negative going to be? Well, that comes from the number over here, 2, and the number 8. So that's negative 16. Now, this poor old minus 4 has just been chilling at the bottom. It hasn't changed. It hasn't done anything. It's just sitting there. But now it's time for it to interact with the 16. And so we're going to go, well, what's a negative divided by a negative? Well, following the rules of double negatives cancel each other out, we have that's a positive. And what's 16 over 4? It's positive 4. And so my final answer here will be positive 4. Now, the same idea is going to be applied in number 7, where I have to work with the top part, I have to work with the bottom part, and then they have to interact after that. Okay. So let me do number 7, 8, and 9. I'm going to give them a bit more space. So for number 7, negative times a positive is going to be a negative on top. And then 6 times 12 is 72. Again, just from my timetable knowledge. For the bottom, for the denominator, there's an odd number of negatives. There's 3 negatives. And so I know, even without counting it, this is going to end up being a negative. Now I could go a negative times a negative is a positive, and then a positive times a negative is a negative, but I knew that already, so why waste time on it? Then go 3 times 1 times 3, and I get 9. Okay, so we've dealt with the top, and we've dealt with the bottom. Now we have to get them interacting. Negative divided by a negative is again a positive. 72 divided by 9, and this is where times tables is helpful, is 8. Because I know that 8 times 9 is 72. Okay, so that is number 7. Number 8, and as you do more of these, your brain goes, oh, I know what's happening here. A negative times a negative is a positive. 5 times 6 is 30. Then on the bottom, a negative times a positive is actually not going to be, it's going to end up being negative. And 2 times 3 is going to be 6. Now, I pause there. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes.
so can I jump in here if you don't mind?
Please do, yes.
Okay, I just want to show the learners something. You guys should be able to see me now, right? Okay. So I think the big thing here that we are struggling with is the order in which we approach this. So if you were in Monday's lesson, remember I spoke of S and M. So you first do your symbol. So like Sir does with number 8. So if this also confuses you, I know it's now reverse writing on your screen, but if you see a fraction, okay, don't do the sum, but take a piece of paper or ruler and then cover the bottom, and then you only do the top. So my numbers are now obviously switched, but in this case, at number 8, Sir's got -5 times -6. So then you first ask yourself, right, what's a negative times a negative? It's a positive. So that's why Sir writes plus. Okay, you don't have to write the plus. Okay. Then he takes it from there. So I think so. So I just wanted to reiterate it. First do your symbols, and then take it one line at a time. If you have to take a piece of paper and cover a half of your fraction, then you do that. Back to you, sir.
I love that idea of covering, because again, no, we don't have to worry about the bottom part at all until we've dealt with the top part. And so previously we said, well, what's -5 times -6? We know it ends up being a positive. So we start by getting what is the correct sign, and then we go, what is the correct number? 5 times 6 is 30. Okay, so now we're going to ignore the top now. We're only going to focus on the bottom. Well, first ask yourself, what's a negative times a positive? I know the positive is hiding in front of the 3. Now, when we have the one's a negative and the one's a positive, we know it ends up being a negative. The problem comes when people are different, right? So it's like when people when there's too much difference, then it ends up sort of being difficult. So it ends up being negative. So now we go, well, we've got the sign. What's 2 times 3? It's 6. And now we no longer have to focus on the top part at all because we've dealt with it. All we're going to focus on now is we're going to focus on this part of the question. And we ask ourselves, what is positive divided by negative, or what's the sign? If they're different, it's going to end up being negative. What's 30 divided by 6? It's going to be 5. And so the answer is going to be -5. Now, the last one, before I take questions, the last one is a little bit sneaky because which ones do you do first? I think it would make sense to rather deal with the more complicated part first. So deal with that. And then once you've done that, you deal with the multiplying by the negative here. So assuming that that is the case, what is negative 22 divided by negative 2? Well, I know that the sign is positive because there's a double negative cancels out. What's 22 over 2? It's 11. But I need to multiply minus 3 by this plus 11. Let me actually just move that up. So now I have to ask myself again. It's almost like I can ignore the top now. Like Ms. Anya was saying, you cover it. You can cover that bit and you just focus on the next part of the question, which is this. And so we go, negative times a positive is negative. 3 times 11 is negative 33. All right. So guys and girls, I do think that we have about 4 minutes left of me kind of being in a lesson. And so what I want to do is I want to open it up for questions. But for those students who feel very comfortable with this, we're going to release kind of the quiz link into the quiz so you can start that. Just to show you where you're going in the next lesson, we'll kind of start the next lesson by just doing these bottom questions. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to start to mix up the questions. Okay, but I don't want you to worry about that too much. That's the next lesson. We're going to go, how do we mix the operations together? Today is the last day where we're just focusing on only one operation at a time. But it's really important that you take the time today to just get that right. That's why whenever people want to go ahead, I go, no, no, no. We just stay today. We're mainly working on division. And so if you have questions that you want to raise, now is the time to do it. Okay, so Ms. Anya, if you could put the link to the quiz for those students who are comfortable and you want to go and do the quiz, go ahead and start that. I will see you next week, Monday. It's been lovely teaching you today. And cheers from me. Best of luck. I hope you enjoy the quiz. But for those students who have questions, let's get them in the chat or raise our hands and me and Ms. Anya will respond as best we can.